Don't buy a house until you watch this. Here is a number that should bother you. In 1950, the average American needed 2.2 years of median income to afford a median-priced home. In 2024, that number is 7.5 years. Not 7.5 years of saving, 7.5 years of your entire income. Every dollar spent on nothing else. And yet the pressure to buy, from your parents, from your colleagues, from the entire architecture of how adulthood is supposed to look, has never been louder. Everyone tells you renting is throwing money away, that buying is building equity, that a home is the best investment you'll ever make. Here is what they don't tell you. Some of the wealthiest people in the world have never bought a home, not because they couldn't afford to, because they ran the numbers, and the numbers said something nobody at the dinner table is saying out loud. By the end of this video, you will have every calculation you need to make this decision correctly for the first time. Not emotionally, not based on what your parents did, based on math. Chapter 1. The myth of throwing money away. The single most repeated argument for buying a home is that rent is dead money. You pay it every month, you get nothing back. Your landlord builds wealth while you build nothing. It sounds airtight. It isn't. When you buy a home, especially in the first decade of a mortgage, the majority of your monthly payment is also not building equity. It is paying interest. On a $350,000 home with a 7% mortgage rate, which is close to where rates have been sitting recently, your monthly payment is approximately $2,328. In month 1 of that mortgage, $2,042 of that payment goes to interest. $286 goes to principal. You are building $286 of equity per month while paying $2,328. That is 12 cents of ownership for every dollar you spend. The person calling rent dead money is paying more than $2,000 a month in dead money and calling it an investment. This doesn't mean buying is wrong. It means the dead money argument is not the argument everyone thinks it is, and it is only one of the costs that never makes it into the dinner table conversation. Chapter 2. The cost nobody adds up here is what the mortgage payment doesn't tell you. And this is where most buying decisions quietly fall apart. Because the number your lender shows you is not the number you actually pay every month. It never is. On top of your mortgage, property taxes add a few $100s every month. Not once. Every month for as long as you own the home. And unlike your fixed mortgage payment, property taxes go up, whether you agree to it or not. Then home insurance. Required by your lender. Non-negotiable. Another monthly bill that existed nowhere in the excitement of house hunting. Then maintenance. The water heater that dies in February. The roof that needs replacing after 10 years. The AC unit that gives out during the first real summer heat. Financial planners use a simple rule: budget 1% of your home's value every year for things breaking. On a $350,000 home, that's $3,500 a year. Some years you spend nothing. Some years you spend double. It averages out. Then HOA fees if your neighborhood has one. And increasingly, most do add all of it up honestly. The home with a $2,300 mortgage payment is often a $3,200 to $3,400 monthly reality. That gap, the distance between what the lender shows you and what the home actually costs, is where most household budgets quietly start suffocating. Nobody puts that number on the brochure, and the person telling you rent is dead money is usually looking only at their mortgage statement, not the full bill. Now compare that to rent for an equivalent property in the same market. In most major American cities right now, a home that costs $350,000 to buy rents for between $1,800 and $2,200 per month. The gap between owning and renting that same home, when you include the full cost of ownership, is frequently over $1,000 per month. That $1,000 is not dead money if you know what to do with it. Which brings us to what nobody talks about. Chapter 3. The investment you never hear about. This is the part of the rent versus buy conversation that gets deliberately avoided, possibly because it is complicated, more likely because it challenges something people have already decided emotionally. It is called the opportunity cost of the down payment. To buy that $350,000 home, you need a down payment. At 20%, the amount required to avoid private mortgage insurance, that is $70,000. $70,000 leaves your accessible world the day you close on the house. It becomes illiquid. It becomes tied to a single asset in a single location that you cannot sell partially, cannot access without refinancing, and cannot rebalance if the local market declines. Now ask a different question. What does $70,000 do if it stays invested in a diversified index fund for 30 years? At the S&P 500's historical average return of approximately 10% annually, $70,000 becomes $1.2 million in 30 years. That is the opportunity cost of the down payment. $1.2 million that the home buying decision quietly removed from your future. Now add the monthly gap. If owning costs you $1,100 more per month than renting the equivalent property, and you invest that $1,100 difference every month for 30 years at the same historical return, that monthly investment grows to an additional $2.2 million. The renter who invested the down payment and the monthly difference does not end up behind the homeowner at retirement. In many scenarios, they end up significantly ahead. This calculation does not make renting automatically correct. It makes the decision far more complicated than anyone is letting on. And it raises a question worth sitting with for a moment. If the math is this close, and in many markets it tilts toward renting, why does the cultural pressure to buy feel so absolute? Chapter 4, What Home Appreciation Actually Looks Like. The homeowner has one major counter-argument. Appreciation, the home goes up in value. You build equity not just through payments, but through the market itself lifting your asset. This is real. It is also significantly overstated in the way most people understand it. Yale economist Robert Shiller, who won the Nobel Prize in Economics and spent decades studying housing data, found that after adjusting for inflation, American home prices appreciated at an average of approximately 0.6% per year in real terms between 1915 and 2015. 0.6%, not 6, not 10, 0.6% real appreciation annually over a century of data. The homes that feel like they went up dramatically in value mostly kept pace with inflation, plus the local economic boom of a specific decade in a specific market. The family that bought in San Francisco in 1990 looks like a genius. The family that bought in Detroit in 2005 looks very different. Most buyers do not have the ability to predict which market they are buying in 30 years in advance. They buy where they live, where they work, where their family is. And where they live, work, and have family is subject to change, which leads to the cost that destroys the math of homeownership more reliably than any other. Chapter 5, The Transaction Cost. Nobody warns you about the single biggest hidden cost in homeownership is not maintenance. It is not property tax. It is selling. When you sell a home in the United States, the total transaction cost, realtor commissions, closing costs, transfer taxes, staging, minor repairs to prepare for sale, runs between 8% and 10% of the sale price. On a $350,000 home that has appreciated to $500,000 over 10 years, you pay between $40,000 and $50,000 simply to exit the asset. That is 10 years of appreciation handed back to the transaction in a single closing. Now factor in how often people actually stay in a home long enough for this math to work in their favor. The National Association of Realtors reports that the median tenure in an owned home is 13 years. 13 years in 13 years at some 6% real appreciation, your $350,000 home is worth approximately $378,000 in real terms. Subtract the transaction cost of selling, Subtract the cumulative property taxes paid over 13 years. Subtract the maintenance costs. Subtract the interest paid in the early years of the mortgage when almost nothing went to principal. In many markets across many scenarios, the homeowner who sold after 13 years made less money than the index fund investor who rented the whole time. Not because real estate is bad, because the costs are real and the timelines are short, and nobody adds the full column. Chapter 6. Why wealthy people rent now. Back to the question the title raised. Why do genuinely wealthy people who could buy anything, anywhere without a mortgage, sometimes choose to rent their entire lives? This is not an urban legend. Warren Buffett still lives in the house he bought in Omaha in 1958 for $31,500. But many of his contemporaries in high net worth circles rent primary residences in expensive markets and own investment properties elsewhere. The reason is not that they hate home ownership. The reason is that they think about housing the way they think about every other capital allocation decision. Where does this dollar work hardest? For someone with significant capital, locking $70,000 into an illiquid asset in a single market with 0.6% real appreciation makes very little financial sense when that same capital can generate 8 to 10% annually in a diversified portfolio. The wealthy person who rents a $5,000 per month apartment is not throwing money away. They are paying for flexibility, liquidity, zero maintenance responsibility, and the freedom to redeploy capital to its highest use. They have simply done the math that most people never do because the cultural pressure to buy overrides the calculation before it begins. Flexibility itself has a dollar value that almost nobody assigns correctly. The renter can move for a better job opportunity, can downsize when life changes, can relocate to a lower-cost market, can respond to life without being anchored to a transaction that costs 10% to exit. The homeowner pays for immobility in ways that don't show up on any mortgage calculator. Chapter 7. When Boeing actually wins. This video is not an argument against buying a home. It is an argument against buying a home before you have run the full calculation. Because there are clear scenarios where buying wins decisively when you have a genuinely long time horizon, and the math of home ownership improves dramatically past the 20-year mark. Transaction costs amortize. Equity builds meaningfully. The mortgage payment stays fixed while rent around you inflates. If you are buying a home you will live in for 25 or 30 years, buying is almost always the correct financial decision. When you are in a market with strong real appreciation fundamentals, not all markets are equal. Cities with constrained land supply, growing population, and strong economic drivers consistently outperform Shiller's national average. Buying in Austin in 2010 was a completely different decision than buying in Cleveland in 2010. Know your market when the price-to-rent ratio is favorable. There is a simple calculation called the price-to-rent ratio. Take the purchase price of a home, divide it by the annual rent of an equivalent property. If the result is below 15, the market generally favors buying. Between 15 and 20, it's neutral. Above 20, the math tilts toward renting. In many major American cities right now, this ratio sits between 25 and 40. In San Francisco, it exceeds 50. The ratio tells you what the market is actually saying about the relative value of owning versus renting before emotion enters the conversation. When you have genuine stability, job security, geographic certainty, family situation settled. The math of buying only works if you stay. Buying a home when your life has significant variables is not a financial decision. It is an expensive bet on the stability of everything else. Here's the thing about the 7.5 years of income it now takes to afford a median home. That number is not just an affordability statistic. It is a description of how much of your financial life this decision consumes. 7.5 years of income is not a purchase. It is a commitment that restructures everything else: your career flexibility, your investment capacity, your ability to respond to what life actually does, which is almost never what you planned. The people who made this decision well did not make it because they felt ready. They made it because they ran the full calculation. Not the mortgage payment, the full calculation, the opportunity cost of the down payment, the price-to-rent ratio, the real appreciation data, the transaction cost of selling, the timeline they could genuinely commit to. And then, only then, they made the decision that the math supported. Not the decision the dinner table expected. Buying a home is not a milestone. It is a capital allocation decision. The moment you treat it like one is the moment you stop making it emotionally and start making it correctly. Run the numbers, all of them.